You're listening to Building the Broncos with Nick Kendell and Carl Dumler, Broncos Country's leading draft and scouting analysts. Get on over to milehighhuddle.com to sound off on all things Broncos.
Hello there, Broncos Country, and it is once again time for another episode of Building the Broncos. I am your host, Carl Dumler, and with me as always, I have my co-host and good friend, Mr. Nick Kendell. Nick, we have a victory!
It's incredible, man. It feels pretty darn good. I won't lie. This weekend kind of started off a little bit rough. Hawkeyes went into Michigan and got beat, but then, everything just comes together and the Broncos get that monkey off their back and get a W once again in Los Angeles, or a Mile High West, as it appeared on TV. So, yeah, no, it's great. Wasn't the prettiest game, but you know what? That's football. Those other guys are out there to make plays too. So if you can get out of a road game, quote unquote road game with a W, it's pretty much all you can ask for. So
can I do my flex moment?
Sure.
So in our predictions piece that we do every week of all the writers writing in, I said not only the Broncos would get the victory, but I also said the Broncos would have their first 100-yard rusher. And boom, both happened.
Yeah, I will say I've definitely... Well, I'll save it coming up here. But the run game, there is some good stuff to talk about with that going forward.
Right. For sure. Yeah, I'm excited. I mean, it's easier to talk about a game after a win, obviously. The stock up, stock down. You're not trying to justify, like, hey, there's still some good. I mean, you are, but it's still, it's much easier to talk about some of these things. And there's, I mean, we've been saying it on this show. There's signs that there's good things happening here with the Broncos. It just hasn't quite translated to the record. And so, yeah, I'm very excited to get to talk to you about this. And definitely, everybody, you need to be following us on Twitter because we have lots and lots of thoughts. I saw one you put on there, something about how the Chargers had more pressure, and yet the Broncos had more turnovers. I can't remember how that tweet went.
Well, let me see if I can find it. I know that the Broncos had just an absolutely insane pressure rate against them, which is concerning considering they only had 20 dropbacks. I think Flacco was pressured on like 80% of his dropbacks or something. I should find that. But some of the cool stats I had, the Chargers gave up 0 sacks despite throwing the ball 48 times. Broncos' average yards per play was 6.4, where the Chargers was 3.8. So that explosive play stuff, guys, it really does matter. And big reason that happened, the 7-yard touchdown pass. The Broncos had 12 penalties for 122 yards compared to the Chargers with 4 for 43. But the Broncos did still win the turnover battle 3-2. And the 3 sacks, despite only 23 pass plays, not great. So that's a big thing. And honestly, the turnovers, Broncos won the turnover battle, but the Chargers going 0 for 4 on touchdowns in the red zone, I mean, there's your game. Crazy.
Yep.
Crazy stat.
So, again, you find those kind of tweets on Twitter from us, especially from Nick. So make sure you're following us. You can find me at Carl Dumler MHH and Nick at Nick Kendell MHH. And you can follow the podcast Twitter account at BTB Football Pod. And make sure you subscribe to our show and leave us a rating as we value your input. You can find the show on iTunes, Stitcher, and even that of YouTube. Also, make sure you head on over to milehighhuddle.com, a new affiliate of the Maven Coalition and Sports Illustrated. And just know that this podcast is powered by Overtime Media.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
A phenomenal win for the Denver Broncos on Sunday, beating the Chargers in LA for the second year in a row. Phenomenal. And they also covered. You guys, if you've missed out on any of the fun, there is still plenty of time left for you to get in on the action with MyBookie. Of course, we got the Broncos Titans this week, but how about an in-game wager or some player props? Do you still think the AFC West might be in play with the Chiefs losing and the Raiders winning and the Chargers losing and the Broncos winning? You guys go get great odds on that too. That just scratches the surface though. I mean, we have teamed up with MyBookie this October to give you this great offer. Here it is. Ready? Sign up at mybookie.ag, use promo code OVERTIME, and they will match your first deposit. Again, promo code OVERTIME, and new users, you get your first deposit doubled. mybookie.ag. You play, you win, you get paid.
Well, Nick, I do have to add one thing before we get into our stock up, stock down, that I got extra bonus living here in Kansas in the Chiefs losing.
Oh, of course.
So, I had to go to a conference Sunday right after the game. And so I stopped at the gas station, and here's all these Chief fans getting all this beer, getting ready for the game. And I was just thinking after when I saw that the Chiefs lost, I'm like, oh, I bet those beers taste very bitter right now. And so it's just kind of that extra icing on the cake, because, I mean, when you're surrounded by Chiefs fans and you get to hear all the time about how great Patrick Mahomes is, and I think he's a good guy. Don't get me wrong, but I definitely cheer against him. And so it's good to see them come up short, especially in a game that, the announcers kept just... Did you listen to the game?
I was watching the game, but I was at a bar, and they had music going. So watching it, but did not listen.
That was probably for the better, because they were all over Mahomes, just of how amazing he is, and he's the greatest human being to walk the earth kind of thing. So... Again, kind of nice to see that the Chiefs then go out and lose, and Mahomes has a pretty terrible game. I think I saw something about how in the first 3 games he threw 10 touchdown passes.
Yeah, he was on breakneck pace.
Yeah, and the last 2 he's only thrown 1 total. So we'll kind of see, and we're going to have the Chiefs coming up here in less. 2 Thursdays from now, Broncos Chiefs. Thursday night,
yeah, that'll be great. And I do want to point out, you're talking about the Chiefs' offense kind of looking vulnerable, but this just bringing it back to our later conversation last week. The Chiefs are without their left tackle, their center went down, and without their number 1 and number 3 weapons in the pass game. I would say maybe 1A to Travis Kelce being 1B, but Sammy Watkins and Tyreek Hill out. And eventually when that stuff happens, you kind of just... the quarterback looks more vulnerable.
Right.
So,
right. Even, like you said, we talked about this last week of even the greats still need something around them. Even Tom Brady had 2 Hall of Fame players that he played with big time. Randy Moss, maybe, you could make the argument that he's maybe the best wide receiver to ever play, or most physically gifted wide receiver. Maybe that's a better way to put it. And of course, then maybe one of the greatest tight ends to ever play the game, if not the best tight end to play the game. And so Peyton Manning, we already talked about that. He had 2 Hall of Fame wide receivers with him as well. And so when you start losing some of those weapons and you got players that you're not quite used to, it definitely matters. And for the Chiefs, they have to, you can't have it completely be an excuse, because you still have to go out there and play. Every team has some injuries right now. And for the Broncos, that just kind of tying into our stock up, stock down. Some injuries. We had Josie Jewell go down. And for your first stock up, you have his replacement, don't you?
Alexander Johnson, A.J. Johnson, whatever the heck he wants to be called. He was a guy that I did not expect. I don't think anybody expected this. Heck, Vic Fangio didn't expect this when you hear him talking about him after the game. But 9 tackles, 6 solo tackles, 1 tackle for loss, 2 pass defensed, and 1 interception. Should have had 2 interceptions. And, man, the energy that he brought, the thump that he brought, he is a big boy. Listed, I believe, 6'2", 250, 255. He can move around. He showed really good instincts in coming downhill and just kind of a tenacity. Unfortunately, we did get a friendly fire where he... thank God that Bosby's okay, but he hit Bosby pretty hard, and that was a scary moment there, but really brought some instincts and tenacity to that heavier, more just powerful front 7 this week, with the Broncos sitting Gotsis and bringing in Purcell and also seeing A.J. Johnson in there. And I was really impressed. He was graded at, I believe PFF had him at a 91.3, which
91.9.
91.9. Wow,
yep.
Thank you. Thank you, producer. But yeah, what a great game. And Vic Fangio today said, he was out there, he made some mistakes. He's still a young player, still a little bit raw in the mental aspect. But until further notice, he's the guy that should be starting at linebacker. Now, granted, even though he had a couple of hands on the balls in this game, that sounded bad. But he is a guy that, on paper, is one that will struggle from time to time in the pass game, and the Chargers were without the likes of Hunter Henry, and Virgil Green, who's already not a great pass threat, was banged up. So keep that in mind going forward. I don't think A.J. Johnson is going to be this complete revelation for the Broncos. But again, I preach skepticism when it comes to stuff like this, especially with a small one-game sample size against a team that is weak on the offensive line as the Chargers are. But still, that's a guy who went out there and played great, made the most of his opportunity, and he's a young player still, and he's going to get more opportunities. So really excited about that, and excited to see what he can do going forward. And I think as much as Josie Jewell was not the issue with this defense going forward, he also wasn't really doing anything beyond being, a kind of one of those guys that you use while they're here and then let them walk when they're done. Not a guy that you want to build around by any means, at least what he's shown so far. And A.J. Johnson had more flashes in this game than I can remember from Jewell so far. So that's great. Him and Todd Davis, not the fastest guys, not the most fluid guys, but really will help shore up that Broncos in the run game. And I know it's a passing league, but you still got to earn those 3rd and longs so those pass rushers can get after it and you can create those turnover plays. So really like that there. Stock way up on A.J. Johnson. Probably close to player of the game. He was awesome out there.
Oh, I agree. Definitely. I mean, like I said, it's a one-game sample. And I know there's been a lot of people questioning, why hasn't he been starting this whole year?
I'm questioning it, but that's almost has much to do with how just not great Corey Nelson was.
Right. And so it's understandable a little bit there. But I do remember Johnson quite a few times during the preseason, especially in coverage, being a couple steps behind. And so I do want to see when he gets against maybe some better tight ends that he's going to have to cover, or some running backs that are a little bit more. I mean, I guess the Chargers running backs are actually pretty good in the pass game. So yeah. I shouldn't take away from him on that part. But again, tight ends, if he has to start getting into some coverage with them, we'll see how he handles some of that. But overall, definitely, I mean, I would say player of the game.
Yeah. It's either him or Lindsay.
Yeah, no, I agree. And so then I went back and forth on who I was going to pick here, because there are so many players that definitely deserve some recognition. And I guess I'll go Philip Lindsay here. I did have actually Dalton Reisner, just because I love the fire that he brings to the team. I mean, there's so many plays where you just see him getting his guy pushed 2, 3, 5 yards down the field. And I mean, there's a lot of running plays where he just is the lead man. That one where he came pulling to the right and sprung Lindsay for a very long run there. I think was that in the fourth quarter? Or was that earlier?
Yes, I believe so. No, I think that was.
Okay. I mean, those kind of plays. But no, I'll go Philip Lindsay, just because he definitely deserves to get recognized here for the kind of game that he had. I mean, just both in the pass game, run game. I mean, he was running with power. He was running with speed. I mean, you just saw the old Philip Lindsay from last year. And I'm not saying that he disappeared this year at all, but I do think that there has been some just adjustment period, not only for the offensive line, but for the running backs as well. And there's been a couple times where Lindsay, I felt like, missed the cutback lane, where this is one of those games where he really saw that cutback lane, hit it hard, and boom, big run. And just really sparked this offense. Just, I mean, lots and lots of great plays. So far, I mean, we talked about it in the preseason that we were a little bit worried about his hands in the pass game. Well, he caught every catchable pass in this one that was thrown his way. And so for overall, I mean, just he's that spark that the Broncos need on the offense. He's that big player that's, I mean, in both the pass and run game, he definitely deserves his due. And showing why he was a Pro Bowler last year, still looking like that same Philip Lindsay this year.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree with you there. I do have a question for you. I guess I saw some hand wringing go as far as the distribution of where the passes went this week. You know how many passes that Emmanuel Sanders had this week? Targets?
Was it like 2?
Technically, it was 1.
Was it? Okay.
How many do you think Courtland Sutton had?
That's a good question.
7.
7? Okay.
7 to Emmanuel Sanders, 1. Even Philip Lindsay had 4. So I see some people really just, questioning the offense and the pass distribution, some of the Scangarello stuff, especially in that second half, which I get it. There were some struggles there, but guys, that Broncos offensive line was not holding up in the pass game. Here's some next-gen stats for you. Joe Flacco pulled off the win for the Broncos despite being pressured on 14 of 23 dropbacks. 14 of 23. That's a crazy rate. 60.9%, which is the highest a winning quarterback has seen since Andrew Luck, Week 7, 2016. And despite only dropping back 23 times, he was also taken down 3 times for 23 yards. So sacked 3 times, including that strip sack. So I get, wanting to see Deshaun Hamilton and Emmanuel Sanders and Noah Fant get more targets in this pass game. I would love to see it too. But until Juwan James comes back and Garrett Bowles, who's rated the 4th highest pass blocking grade from Pro Football Focus, how I do not know, since that Week 2 debacle, I think there's a little bit of subjectiveness to those PFF grades, folks. I'll just put it at that. But I do think that the usage, Philip Lindsay in the pass game, we've been calling for it, but people are saying, hey, Emmanuel Sanders, why is he not getting involved? Noah Fant, why is he not getting involved? Rich Scangarello, what are you doing? I think that the Broncos are very much hamstrung by those tackles right now in the pass game. And it's making the play action not work as well. It's meaning less 5-step drops. You got to be quick. And it's meaning also that the running backs and tight ends, even when they're out there, they're limited in what they can do because they have to be in there and help first. That's first priority.
Right. And I mean, that's the hope when Juwan James gets back, that maybe some of that can change a little bit, that they can be a little bit more secure on that right side for sure. I mean, you can't play much worse than Wilkinson did, and we'll talk about that here in just a second. But the other part of that is there's only 23 dropbacks to go around, with 3 of those ending in sacks. So that's 20 passes to go around. And, I mean, I think also with Sanders, I mean, I need to go back and watch this a little bit more, but it looked like they were pretty much saying Sanders is not going to beat us today. Kind of like the Broncos said, Keenan Allen is not going to beat us today. And so sometimes, I mean, that's exactly what teams do. They want to shut down your number one player on offense, that offensive weapon, and just see if any other player can step up and make a play. And so, like, the Chargers, I mean, their leading receiver in the game was a running back. Austin Eckler, 15 receptions in that game for 86 yards. Number 2, Mike Williams. And so again, Keenan Allen was the leading receiver in the NFL in yards going into that game. And they decided we're not going to let that happen to us. So there's just so much that goes into why one game a player shows up really big. The next game, they're less involved, especially as a receiver. Running back, you can get them a little bit more. You can kind of force feed it to him. And that's the other thing. I mean, if the run game's working, why get away from it?
Yeah.
I mean, Philip Lindsay, 15 carries, Royce Freeman, 13 carries, 32 total rushes for 191 yards, 6 yards a carry. It's just kind of hard to want to go away from that. And really, it wasn't that they were having these really long runs. I mean, Philip Lindsay had his one really long one for 32, and I think another pretty long one as well. But, I mean, most of the rest of them were at that 4, 5, 6 yard chunks and just really grinding down that Charger defense. So it just was the game plan for yesterday. And, I mean, I'm sure it's going to be the game plan for a lot of games, that you're going to see a lot of times where there's probably not going to be as many pass attempts because, like you said, the pass blocking offensive line is not great right now. And the run blocking offensive line is starting to show up a lot more. And the running backs are showing what we were hoping during the preseason.
Yeah. Nope, I am 100% with you there. So that's really exciting. And, man, we've been going on for 15 minutes now just to stock up through two
I know.
guys.
It's exciting. I mean, like, after a win, it's just hard not to get excited, especially after 8 straight losses.
Yeah. No, you are so correct. So that's, we got to – honestly, I wanted to add more people here. I had put an honorable mention section down so if we want to have some more people there. But
okay.
Stock down. I got to say the special teams. Wadman had an okay game, but you had the McManus miss, which obviously that's something you're going to need to look into. I mean, there's been struggles there recently, and for how much he's making, You might be stuck with him this year, but definitely not secure next year. Desmond King, punt return, there might have been a hold on that, but I mean, that changed the complexion of the game. Typically, a team, if you're going to be scoring special teams points, that team's going to end up winning. Those are massive. And if the Broncos did everything else great on special teams, that still would have been a negative because you can't give up punt returns for touchdowns. Granted, Desmond King, go Hawks, but still, don't want to see it. And then Deontay Spencer, that fair catch in the 5, yuck. And Fred Brown doinking that one off his helmet, yuck. So really, all in all, a really bad game from the special teams and perhaps the worst so far from them. And the Broncos ended up getting a W anyway, but that's the indications of preseason and how bad they were there showing their head.
Who would have thought the old saying is you have to win 2 of the 3 positions of, offense, defense, special teams, that the Broncos would lose special teams and win offense and defense in this game.
Yeah.
I mean, that just, it just kind of seems crazy to me because, I feel like I kind of called it, but the wrong way. Because on our podcast, I'd said the Chargers are so banged up, I think that we're going to get a special teams touchdown. And then, of course, they are the ones that get a special teams touchdowns, those jerks. But, no, it just, again, I had to almost laugh afterwards because, come on, now I got to talk about that. But no, you're right. Special teams was not very special. And it was very frustrating because there was so many times that it was very close. That McManus miss, that would have put the game away. And it wasn't like it missed by a whole lot, but he's just been that little bit off all year. And, especially after he missed that one extra point that ended up getting a penalty, I think that really got to his head because he hadn't missed one, I don't think, in his career. And then he missed that one that didn't count. And he just, like I said, he's just looked off since then. But then, like I said, the fair catch inside the 5 was terrible. The doink off the helmet by Brown, if he wasn't a receiver, I would understand it, but he's a receiver. So that should be his main job, is catching things. And it would have been a huge play to get them backed up. But anyway, my guy that I'm going to go with, it's a pretty obvious one, Isaac Yiadom. Not a great game again. Just, it's kind of like Garrett Bowles a few weeks ago when we were talking about all of his holding penalties and just going, what are you doing? You should know you can't sit there and hold on to a guy the entire route. You can't just grab his jersey and keep yanking on it. You have to play smarter than that. And his replacement that came in, I thought actually maybe played worse than him, but got away with a couple things. Where with Yiadom, he's lost his confidence. It's easy to see that. And I understand the benching of him, but it's getting where you're going to run into some teams that are going to have some pretty deep wide receiver cores. And you have to worry about right now the Broncos just don't have the depth in the secondary to handle it.
Especially with Bosby going down and everything like that. Although Duke Dawson, looked interesting out there. I don't know if he's an answer, but, enough to keep digging on there. So worth seeing that. So stock down, I agree with you. Yiadom. Stock up for me here, Courtland Sutton. Guy is emerging, becoming a true X-wide receiver 1 out there game by game. I don't think it's a stretch to say he's the Broncos' best pass weapon right now. He's just improved so much as far as his ability to separate and use nuance in different areas of the field. And I hat tip to Scangarello as well. That play call was beautiful. But, just looking at him, this game, 4 receptions on 7 targets, 92 yards, and that 1 touchdown. Granted, that one was a big one, but when you are an explosive playmaker, those big ones count. 70-yard touchdown pass, longest for the Broncos since 2016. And just looking at him, he's only 24 right now, but comparing him through 5 games compared to his 16 games last year, he already has 38 targets. He had 84 last year. Already has 26 receptions, had 42 last year. Already has 400 yards compared to 704 last year. His yards per reception is down from 16.8 to 15.4, but I think that's actually a good thing because that means that he is doing a better job in diversifying his routes instead of just needing to be that jump ball guy on the outside. Only 3 touchdowns this year already compared to 4 the entirety of last year. 20 first downs this year compared to 30 last year. And 5.2 receptions per game, which is up from 2.6 last year, 80.2 yards per game, up from 44 last year, and a catch rate of 68.4, but also, while his yards per reception is down, his yards per target is up from 8.4 to 10.6. So really just emerging as a true dynamic player from this passing offense, and he's only 24. He's just getting started. So I'm excited about him, and Emmanuel Sanders is still there for now. Who knows what's going to happen with that going forward, and Deshaun Hamilton hasn't really shown much yet. We haven't really seen much yet from Juwann Winfrey, but having Courtland Sutton there, the rest of this year and the next 2 years, for what he is, for what he's being paid, for his youth and upside, that's a great piece to have. So stock up for Courtland Sutton. I know we can't have him there every week, but after that touchdown pass, which I was just freaking out about, has to be a stock up.
Oh, for sure. When you put it, you got to do the outline first. So, you get first choice, that's fine. But when you had him, I was going, you jerk. That's my boy. No, I love what he's doing on the field. Right now, if you pan out these stats for the rest of the season, he's on target for 1,300 yards and 10 touchdowns. That's Pro Bowl level wide receiver right there. And so definitely nice for the Broncos to have that here, second year of his NFL career, and just see what this guy can do moving forward. I'm excited. The sky's the limit. He still has room to grow. That's what's crazy about this kid. And, he's got the height, weight. He's not the fastest guy, but he's not the slowest guy either. And, I think he can get up to speed pretty quick. He's getting much better about getting off press coverage. Teams can't do that against him as much as they used to. There's just so much good that's going on in his life. And then I'm going to go another young guy here. That's what's really nice is we've got so many young guys on this list. We've got Philip Lindsay, AJ Johnson, or Alexander Johnson, whatever you want to call him, Courtland Sutton. I'm going to go with Malik Reed. Everybody kept talking about what's going to happen with Bradley Chubb out of the lineup. And while Bradley Chubb being gone hurts, there's no getting around that. I would say that Malik Reed did a very good job of really substituting in and being a impact player in the game. He was getting pressure. He was helping out in the run game. I think he had that one really big run where they were running to the right. Von Miller kind of crashed down on the play, and the running back was just about to cut out towards the edge. Malik Reed came down the line of scrimmage, and boom, big play. And so, again, this guy just really came in, made an impact, and that's all you can ask for a guy that's substituting in for one of the biggest stars on the team. And so very impressed by him for his first start, and hoping to see him just continue down that path. Because, this was one of our big questions heading into the season. What kind of depth do they have at the pass rusher? If Von Miller or Bradley Chubb go down, who do they have? Well, right now, Malik Reed looking like he's going to be another diamond in the rough for the Broncos.
Yeah, I'm excited about him. Haven't seen all that versatility yet that he possesses, but it's there. The coverage stuff, I think it's coming. So excited about that. Stock down for me. Last stock down here. Elijah Wilkinson. He may have heavy hands. They may like his work ethic, but even, comparison to Garrett Bowles, who, up and down still, you can just see that he doesn't have it to play tackle, the foot speed, the combination of tools. If he was the size of like Orlando Brown, 6'9", massive arm length, and 35 arm length, and could negate some of that lack of speed with length and size, then okay. But right now he just does it. I don't think he's got it at tackle. And the fact that he can do that there and they can get away with it, okay, but it's not ideal, folks. So Wilkinson, probably more of a guard playing tackle right now, and we really need James to get back, but if he gets injured again, that's what you're going to have to roll with. But it's a big reason that tackle's a need. So Wilkinson, a guy that you love to have, whether that be maybe a starting guard down the line or just a depth guy, your 6th or 7th offensive lineman who can come in and fill in at right tackle and not be totally incompetent. But he doesn't belong out there, folks, and they're really changing the scheme because they do not trust him as well as Bowles, I believe, at the tackle position, even though Bowles is playing better. But Wilkinson, man, get well soon, James. Hopefully we'll see you back.
I was going to ask you, have you heard anything about his recovery? When they're expecting him?
He's still week to week. It could be this week, though. But he's still week to week.
Okay. because that would be a really nice player to have back for these next couple games here. But yeah,
I'm curious how it would change the play calling, because I feel like right now they are, granted, Joe Flacco is a very pocket pass protection dependent quarterback. We knew that coming in, but I think because of your two tackles right now being the liability that they are, I mean, we saw it. Flacco pressured it a crazy amount, 60-point-some% or whatever it was, that you have to be able to, 60.9%, you have to be able to protect those edges, and I think it's just limiting the dynamic ability of this offense in the pass game specifically. And even specifically in the pass game, I think play action as well, because if your tackles are getting beat that badly and you're putting your quarterback in the play action under center specifically, their back is to the line of scrimmage. You have to be able to trust that they can at least get, 3.5 seconds. And right now they're not doing that. So, yeah, stock down specifically for Wilkinson. Yeah, he's not a tackle.
Can't disagree. I'm going to go, since you went the whole special teams unit, I'm going to go second half execution on the let's just say the offensive side, because the defense still held their end on things. I mean, really, if you think about it, the defense gave up 6 points, with 3 of those coming pretty much in garbage time where you're just trying to wind down the clock. So nothing against the defense, but second half execution for the last 2 games for the offense. I mean, I guess here's my question to you. And I guess maybe the real answer is it's a mix of both. But I mean, is it execution by the offensive players or is it play calling?
Yeah, truth lies in the middle.
It just seems so crazy that the last couple games they've actually started off pretty hot. I mean, Broncos scored touchdowns on their first 2 drives in this past game, and then 6 points the rest of the game. And that was with the defense forcing some turnovers, and I mean, they had 3 turnovers, and the Broncos still couldn't put up more points. And so it's one of those, until I see it, it's going to be hard to trust that they can make the adjustments. It just seems like they either kind of sit back and become very conservative, or they just seem to not execute the way that you would want them to execute. Because there are a lot of plays that you just see players not making the plays that they did in the first half. You see the offensive line having a lot of breakdowns there in the second half. So I do think some of this really goes back to the players. But I do wonder a little bit on some of the play calling decisions that they had of just what they were trying to do and not getting it done. I mean, I did like in the fourth quarter, they really leaned on that run game again and just pretty much put the game away with the run game. But beyond that, it just was hard to see the offense sputtering so much. Really, I mean, when you got a team down like they did, 17-0, you can't let them back in. You got to put your foot on the throat and just go for the kill. And so far, they just haven't been able to get that kill shot, I guess you would call it. I mean, they just can't finish it. And so until I see that, it's going to be hard for me to believe that this can be a consistent winner of a team.
I agree with you there. So they haven't played a complete game yet, but again, this is not a great team on paper. So, you're going to have some issues. New scheme, a lot of new players, not a great talented team. So going to see those uneven performances, I think, going forward still. And my final stock up here, a guy that, man, he, as much as this position is dying out, I think he is probably a real catalyst for this offense, specifically Philip Lindsay and how the Broncos are able to run between the tackles, and that is Andy Janovich. Look, I know the data says that running with a fullback is actually less effective in a yards per carry basis than running in 11 personnel, because that means that teams are going to be loading up in the box, and odds are they're playing that run, so if you're running it, they're prepared for it. It's more about getting those mismatches, but Janovich is good. He's good at what he does. He did have that drop. I'd love to see him get more integrated in the pass game. I think that's something that we could see going forward. I mean, that's the deception. It's key. You got to be able to do something like that. I mean, it's what makes the 49ers right now, which are laying it on the, well, not laying it, but it's early, but 14-3 against the Browns, that they'd use Kyle Juszczyk really effectively in the pass game. And that's a matchup that he can win. You know, they're not expecting it. They get him up against linebackers, and you can get a big explosive pass play from that. So that's huge. Oh, Myles Garrett sacked. Probably defensive rookie of the year or player of the year in my opinion at this point. But he's Janovich has got to do a better job in the pass game, but he's just so good in the run game. Blasts guys open and brings energy. They were really missing him this week. You talked about Philip Lindsay being that first 100-yard rusher. I should have said the underrated key player of the game, Andy Janovich, because of what he does for that between the tackles run game. And he's great in the ISO. He's great at getting to the second level and great at creating space. And when Lindsay can get a little bit of space, he can do big things. So Janovich, stock up for me. Good player. Somebody that I feel like personally, I'm calling myself out here, I've underrated his impact for this Broncos offense. And I think he's somebody that is going to become more and more integrated into this game overall, especially with the Broncos not having great tight end talent beyond Noah Fant.
Well, I'm going to give my last one, and I know I said that A.J. Johnson was maybe the player of the game. This guy might have an argument for it.
I think he does.
Kareem Jackson. Let me start with this. Let me ask you a question to start this. If he plays last week 100% against Jacksonville, do the Broncos win that game?
I think they do.
I do too. You think about how many tackles did Will Parks miss last week? And that was the player that substituted in for Kareem Jackson. I mean, I know Duke Dawson did too, but both those guys are nothing compared to Kareem Jackson. I mean, Kareem Jackson is the tone setter on defense. He's the energy bug, or the Energizer Bunny, or whatever you want to call him. He is flying all over the field. He is that guy that just seems, if there's a guy that's going to make a play for this defense to really put a game away, it's Kareem Jackson. I mean, just the end of the first half, 4th down, and it looks like Eckler has the edge. It looks like he's going to just be able to walk it into the end zone. And Kareem Jackson comes flying down the line of scrimmage and is able to get just enough push to save a touchdown there. And I mean, you think about what would be going through both teams' heads going into the locker room. If the Chargers score and they're right back in at 17-7 right before the half and they get the ball to start the second half, I'm starting to think that they're probably going to win.
If the Broncos offense did what they did in the second half.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, that was just a huge play for just momentum going into the half, where last week, I mean, you have Flacco throw that interception where it gets them 3 points right before the half, and then Jacksonville's able to come out in the second half and do what they did. And so, again, just those little plays that you can look back at the game and say, this defined the game. To me, that play defined that game. Maybe A.J. Johnson's tackle at the play before that, maybe you could say that was the other play that really defines the game. But I mean, right there, those two plays just really changed everything. And so having Kareem Jackson back on the defense, just such a huge momentum boost for that defense. And it's just night and day what they can do as a total defense. Because, I mean, you've said it on the show many times. He's that guy that you can move around, that you can have him play matchup football, that you can, I mean, he's just that joker player. Whatever you need him to do, he'll go out there and do. And the fact that he is, like 5'10", 180 pounds, soaking wet, and he's going out there making some of those plays in the run game, I love his game, and I hope he can stay healthy, because the Broncos don't have anybody that can bring to the field what he brings to the field.
I agree with you. They need to have that physicality coming down from that level, because as much as I like the upside, and as well as Justin Simmons is playing, he just doesn't offer that hitting. There's a certain impact and presence that having that type of safety brings. And it's not that Kareem Jackson is TJ Ward or, Cam Chancellor in that regard. But still, they really need it. And that versatility he's bringing, I mean, Vid Fangio said today that they really hope they can keep Kareem Jackson at safety, because that's where they prefer him. They might have to move him to cornerback out of necessity, getting the best guys out there. But, man, he's playing really well, and that's looking like a heck of a signing for the Broncos. I would even say that he's their energy leader right now. as he goes, the defense goes. So excited to see that. So any honorable mentions here? I mean, Mike Purcell had a good game. Shelby Harris, I think, had as many pressures in this game as he's had all season. I think Connor McGovern, outside of a few bad snaps, which is, we got to talk about that. That's important. But I thought he had a pretty good game. Anybody else really stand out to you?
Well, Chris Harris, I think, had his best game of the year.
Yes.
I thought he showed a lot more tenacity, and they were asking him to kind of really be one-on-one every time, and he seemed to hold up most of the game. So I got to give a shout-out to him. I'm trying to think who else really kind of showed something. Andrew Beck.
Crosby was playing well before. Andrew Beck, yeah.
I mean, he's looking like a very, very strong blocker. There's a couple times early in the season I was like, who is that? Who's 83? And now I'm sitting there going, oh, yeah, there goes Beck. And so nice play. I'm glad he got his first catch of the season. But overall, that would be a guy that I think is kind of an underrated player on this team right now. I do think, I mean, you talked about him already, but Justin Simmons, he continues to show well in coverage. And I mean, he was right there. If A.J. Johnson didn't get the interception, I think Justin Simmons is right there to have a chance at it too in the end zone. And so I've really liked watching him in coverage this year. And so, I mean, there's just a lot of players. When you look at that defense and they hold the Chargers to 6 points, you got to look at that entire unit and say, wow, nice job, guys, especially on the road.
I agree with you. All right, well, we should probably take a second break here. Otherwise, Chad's going to be mad at us. No, just kidding. But we'll be right back, folks. Don't go anywhere.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Alrighty, and we are back on the Building the Broncos podcast. I am Nick Kendell, along with Carl Dumler. And Carl, just some odd findings. Kind of touched on these earlier, but just some interesting things from the game that I have found doing some digging. And we talked about a bunch of it already, but the Broncos, the offensive line, especially in the run game, they did have a better game, but considering the fact that Ingram was out for the Chargers, a little bit of concerns there for the pass protection. 3 sacks, not great. Flacco, obviously, there's synergy between, or whatever the opposite of synergy is, between the pass blocking and having a very pocket-dependent quarterback like Joe Flacco, but 3 sacks on 23 dropbacks, not great. That rate of 60.9, not great. So definitely something to look forward going forward. The Broncos had a lot of pressure in this game. However, they were only able to get 0 sacks, and maybe that's a little bit concerning considering that the Chargers offensive line is not good, and Philip Rivers ended up throwing the ball 48 times. But, when you have a quarterback like Philip Rivers who didn't have a great game, but still quick release, quick processor, not the worst, but something to note going forward. The Broncos have had some issues there. Although I thought Von Miller played his best game of the season as well. Even though he had 2 sacks against Jacksonville, I think he was more impactful in this game. Just really turning around, showing. He's still a great player. Still one of the top 3 defensive players in football for my money. Myles Garrett, maybe I should make a top 4. Myles Garrett's playing pretty incredible ball. The thing that probably scared me the most in this game, Broncos with 12 penalties for 122 yards. You can't win many games when you're committing that many penalties. Special teams, again, not play great given the turnover. But the explosive plays and the run difference, when the offensive line is blocking as bad as it is, but you're running the ball for 6 yards a pop, why change that? It's a passing league, but you got to go with what you're built for and what's working. And right now, that's the run game. It's kind of trending towards last year in that regard, where the pass blocking is not getting it done. They're struggling there. But the run blocking starting to come together and really starting to show those running backs. So, honest to God, start praying for more bad weather, folks, because that's when the run game can really get a good advantage. Broncos might be able to squeeze out some surprising wins in that regard if they can keep running the ball like that. And then finally, the 0 for 4 in the red zone. Just incredible. So anything else stand out to you there? I know also the Broncos went 3 for 11 on 3rd down, which is bad. And they had 2 third down conversions in the first quarter and only had 1 the rest of the game. So really need to do a better job there. And that probably goes hand in hand with the passing offense being better. Thank God for that massive pass play to Courtland Sutton. Otherwise, this is a game that looks different probably, and we're probably really concerned about this Broncos passing attack, considering how many pieces are out for that Chargers. The pass, obviously both safeties and Hayward banged up and Ingram out as well.
Well, a couple stats that really stick out to me. only giving up 246 total yards.
Yeah.
I mean, again, the defense just showed something they haven't shown all year. I mean, really, without the penalties, that game is over much, much quicker. They have to definitely clean that up. I mean, it just 12 penalties, you can't have it. And really, they've been pretty good other than a couple games this year for penalties. So some of that I wonder is just what kind of officials you get. Some of them are a little more flag happy than others, but you still have to play within whatever the refs are doing on the field. You got to adjust to what the refs are doing. So, I mean, that's something. And then, of course, you go from the Jacksonville game where they gave up huge rushing yards to only give up 35 in this one, 2.2 yards per carry. That is, I mean, that's making a statement. That's correcting things during the week. That's the coaching staff saying this is not good enough. I mean, obviously they should know it's not good enough, but that's making adjustments. I love the adjustments that they made. I mean, you think about deciding that they're going to go with a bigger lineup. We already talked about it, getting Mike Purcell in there at the nose tackle position, moving Shelby Harris more to his natural position. I mean, I feel like they listened to our podcast last week, because how much should we talk about how much Shelby Harris is out of position? I mean, really, they shouldn't have needed to listen to our podcast to know that. It was pretty obvious. But again, just getting him into his natural position to go make some plays, getting a bigger nose tackle that can hold up, and we'll see it more against this Titans team where they have a bigger offensive line, a much better offensive line. See if they can do it again. But then, of course, like you said, already substituting Corey Nelson, who weighs 215 pounds, for Alexander Johnson, who weighs 245 pounds. And so, I mean, that 30-pound difference right there, I have to give it to the coaching staff for making those kind of adjustments. I mean, it does seem like it's a little bit of a no-duh after a few weeks of bad. I mean, so maybe you could get after them for not making it quick enough, but at least they made the change, and it showed in this one. So I got to give it to them for that.
All right, well, that's good. Any of these indicators, from this game that you're looking forward to specifically next week? I mean, obviously we have the Scout's Eye preview coming up, but if they can stop the run like this again, Derrick Henry is going to be good. I do want to say, though, I am worried about the tight ends for the Titans much more. Obviously, Alexander Johnson and Todd Davis, not the best in coverage that they've shown. So, it's concerning with that run. Hopefully they'll do the run game again. Talk about a tale of two different games as far as against Leonard Fournette versus against Gordon. But again, I think this probably shows as much as ever how much the system and the offensive line matter in stopping or creating run games, because that Jaguars offensive line built to run the football. I mean, just absolute mass. That Chargers offensive line, not good. Probably bottom 5 unit in the NFL. Right. So any of these things really you take for next week, or clean slate?
Well, I mean, you got to take the run game and what they were able to do, stopping that, I mean, you want to see it 2 weeks in a row, obviously, to feel much better about what they're doing moving forward. I mean, like I said, they made some adjustments, so I do think that it's going to be better than what it was against the Jaguars, but I don't think it's going to be obviously as good as what they just did. You can't get much better than holding them to 35 rushing yards on 16 carries. I mean, the only game that I can think that you're just like, oh my gosh, this was so much better was that Cowboys game. Was it 2016? Where they,
yes, with against Zeke.
Yeah, where they held him to like 8 yards.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's about the only way you can get a little bit better. But beyond that, I mean, if they can hold the Titans to under 100 yards rushing, I think the Broncos easily win that game.
Yeah, make Mariota beat you. However, that Titans defense is pretty damn good. So, we'll see. And before we get to our next section here, why was this win for the Broncos important, in your opinion? Obviously, we're feeling good about it. Fans are feeling good about it. Kind of helps freshen things here, kind of take a step out of the world of suck. But why for the Broncos specifically is this win important? Or is it bad? Are they farther away from the number 1 overall pick now, and that's a bad thing?
No, it's good. I mean, I doubted that they would ever get the number 1 overall pick anyway. I mean, you got the Washington Redskins that look terrible, the Miami Dolphins that look like maybe one of the worst teams to ever play football. And so the odds of them getting the number 1 pick was, the Bengals, was pretty low anyway. And so you needed some wins for this coaching staff above anything else. I mean, the players have been saying everything right. The coaches have been saying everything right. But until you start seeing it in the win column, it's hard to really back up everything that's going on. And so I think, especially for Vic Fangio, just for his message that he's giving to these players, this was a huge win in that aspect. Because you start questioning after you start losing so many games in a row. Okay, you keep saying this is going to work, and I know you have all this history of things working in the NFL, but it's not working here. And so when it actually does work, it just really begins to cement that into the players. It builds some confidence, and you also just don't want to lose the young players and keeping them engaged and wanting to really show off for this team and show what they can do for the future. And really then you also worry about your veterans. Are they going to start grumbling in the locker room like, oh, I'm just here for a paycheck? There's just so many things that winning really fixes so many things. And so, yes, this was a big win for the team. It can build some momentum. I'm not saying that this makes them all of a sudden right back in the playoff mix, but it at least gives them some confidence that things maybe are going to start turning around for this team. Because, I mean, and especially, I can't imagine what it would do to the psyche of a player. I mean, me as a fan at times, I mean, like them losing some of their games that they've lost this year, I mean, it just begins to destroy you when you lose so many close games in a row. And especially if you get up 17-0. I mean, we always talk about it for that 2012 season when the Broncos came back from 17-0 against the Chargers and just kind of destroyed the Chargers. It really destroyed their psyche as a team. And, I mean, so, and for the Broncos, I think they rattled off like 11 straight wins?
Yeah, I believe so.
So, and again, I'm not saying that this is going to be that kind of unit because you don't have primetime Peyton Manning in the building. But it at least sparks something in that locker room. Maybe makes them really keep going at it for the rest of the year. Maybe, I mean, if they win 2 in a row here with the Titans, this is a very winnable game. I mean, it's not a mark it down as a W because none of the games this year are mark it down as a W. But if they can get 2 in a row, again, you're just building something for the future. Not really much for this year, but maybe for the future. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think you nailed it. And also we're bumping up against the timeline here.
Yep.
So, no, you pretty much killed it. I'm agreeing with you. I think it's these young players need to taste success. This coaching staff needs to taste success. They need to believe in each other and in something. And now that they've seen that this can get done, that it's not impossible to win, they know what they can build upon. You know, that confidence is key. That hope is key. They need it. Otherwise, you don't want to see guys starting to check out in there. They need to batten down the hatches and play for each other. Now that they have a win, things can snowball from there. You know, the season could still be tough. I still think they're probably only going to win 4 to 6 games total. But still, young team, they have to know how to win. And games like this, sometimes, I mean, the ball bounced their way. This is one of those games where they could have easily lost this game just as easily as they could have won the Bears or the Jaguars game. They didn't. That's how it works sometimes. Just a little bit of a regression back to the mean, so to speak, for the statistical fans out there. But I think it's important, so that way they can kind of start taking steps and get out of the world of suck, at least mentally, in the locker room, and specifically with these young players going forward. So, all right. Quick break. We'll be right back, folks. Do not go anywhere. We're going to talk a little bit Denver Broncos as it looks going forward to the future.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Alrighty, and we are back on the Building the Broncos podcast. I am Nick Kendell along with Carl. Carl, we wanted to do this last week, but we had a chance to get Ben Albright on the podcast, and we jumped at the opportunity. We love Ben. We love a chance to talk with him. He's, obviously very insightful, good guy as well. So we're back now to talk about this thing that we want to talk about last week, state of the youth on this team, And this kind of goes hand in hand with a lot of stuff we've been talking about, but we really wanted to look at these last 2 draft classes. A jury's still out. It takes 2 to 3 years before you really see these draft classes kind of fill in their own, but there's kind of this narrative out there that John Elway is a terrible drafter. And during the Manning era and probably, everything before 2016, you can kind of say that's the case. His first draft class, 2011, pretty good. Since then, hit or miss. 2016 class, decent class. A lot of players still around here. 2017, I don't want to talk about it. But 2018 and 2019, looking promising, and you just see that with the state of the youth on this team going forward right now. And you kind of did a little bit of groundwork on this one, writing some of these guys out. So I guess I'll kick it over to you, starting with the 2018 class and how this team is looking right now.
Well, and I would just say with John Elway, I think it's almost reversed, where he was so good at finding free agents there to start off his career and so bad at the draft. And now all of his free agents keep getting hurt, and all his draft classes keep showing up pretty well. So, like I said, it's just kind of reversed a little bit. Now you could say a little bit, looking at that 2018 class, you got Bradley Chubb. I know he's down with an ACL, but it's pretty easy to see that this guy's going to become a star. I don't think he'll ever be the best defensive player in football, but I think it's easy to see that he's going to be a top 10 pass rusher in this league for a long time, barring injury, of course. But, he was already showing signs here this year that the Jacksonville game before he went down with injury, he was just living in the backfield with Von Miller. Unfortunately, he had a couple times where he just couldn't make the tackle or the sack. But beyond that, he had other plays and other games where he was so close, just the secondary couldn't hold up. So definitely A-plus draft pick, nailed it. When you have a top 5 pick, you got to nail it. And I think they nailed it with Bradley Chubb. And then, of course, right after that, we've already hit on him. He's been in our stock up almost every single week. Courtland Sutton. I knew he'd be better than last year. I don't think anybody saw him being this good, though.
Especially as how quiet he was in preseason.
Right. Well, I don't even think the Broncos saw him being this good.
There were some. If you remember the Charles Robinson, he went in there and he spoke with some Broncos insiders. And one of his main points was, guys, Courtland Sutton is expected to do huge things this year.
That's true.
So
that is
maybe
true.
The team itself was high on him, but maybe just the general consensus in Broncos country itself, media and fans, not expecting it to be this. But I do feel like the Broncos were setting themselves up to be quite excited with him this year.
Right.
Maybe that's an opportunity thing more than anything. I think they'd be lying if they said, oh, yeah, we saw this coming. Exactly as it's been, because he's been that good. But just want to say there were some indications that there were some flames going on behind the surface there for Sutton.
Good point. Very good point. But no, to see him go from year 1 to year 2, this is why you can't judge a player off their rookie season. He showed signs in his rookie season, but you still had kind of a lot of questions of what this guy could become. But a lot of the growth in these players comes from year 1 to year 2, especially at the wide receiver position. And so just another A-plus draft pick, I would say, for the Broncos. Looking like he's going to be one of those 1,000-yard plus kind of guys, 10 touchdowns a year kind of guys. Because the great thing with him is he's not just a long ball player. He's not just a red zone player. He's a guy that can make plays between the 20s and in the red zone for you. He's exactly what you need in a wide receiver. And I just very, very excited about what he's going to continue to grow as a player. And one of those guys that you can really build around for that wide receiver core and just say, okay, this is a big check mark for us. We have that number 1 wide receiver type. And maybe now we just need to go find a very good complementary piece to what he brings to the field. And so then next pick, Royce Freeman. So first 3 picks, Broncos really nailed these, I would say. Now Royce Freeman, yes, he's not the starter at running back, but he is a part of the two-headed monster at the running back core that is just really showing well this year. I love what he shows I know some people get mad at this where he shows sometimes a little too much patience, but there's so many times, especially in the zone blocking scheme, where running backs can't make it because they can't show the patience they need to show. And so I'd rather have a little bit too much patience at times than too little. And Royce Freeman, he's just a nice complement to what Philip Lindsay brings to the table. I mean, his ability to run between the tackles, he can make people miss. He's got a little bit more burst than I think any of us expected that he would have. I think he's finally gotten healthy again. And so, again, just another good check mark. I'm not going to give it an A+ like the first two, but, I mean, you got to give it a solid B, wouldn't you say?
Yes. I mean, obviously would have preferred to have Fred Warner there in that regard. I was a huge fan of him. But, Royce Freeman looking solid. And the round 3, that's probably about where I would start to be looking to take a running back. And he's looking pretty good. So can't complain there. Moving along here, just because we're already at an hour. Isaac Yiadom and Josie Jewell and Deshaun Hamilton, all guys that still are in the plans for this team. But, once you hit that, once you're outside the top 100 picks, which I believe all 3 of these guys are, you are hitting hopefully at a 33%, maybe even less, so 25% of those guys. In some years, you freaking hit it out of the park. Danny Trevathan and Malik Jackson in the same class, day 3 at that. But these guys, if one of these 3 guys turns out to be a good player for the Broncos, that's about league average. So we'll see yet there. And then the rest of these guys, either trending down or not on the team anymore. The day 3 picks, obviously, Jewell, Hamilton were round 4, I believe, but Fumagalli had 5. It looks like he might be starting to get outplayed by Andrew Beck, for being a Wisconsin guy, not the best blocker. Sam Jones, practice squad for the Cardinals, and that's an indictment on its own, I would say. Keyshawn Bierria, out, I think, about time. Never really saw much with him. David Williams, out as well. And then undrafted free agent, obvious find, Philip Lindsay, A+ there. So looking at Chubb, Sutton, Lindsay, I would say this is a B class right now. But if one of Yiadom, Josie, or Hamilton could step up and provide to be a solid starter, I would give this class a solid A-.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard when your first 2 guys are looking like they're going to be borderline Pro Bowl, possibly a year or 2 of All-Pro kind of players.
Yeah.
So, I mean, when you can get that, when you can nail your first and second round pick like that, again, that's just so huge in building for this team. Broncos kind of been missing that, where it's almost kind of the reverse for a few of these drafts. I think of the 2016 draft where, well, you got to kind of look at the first 2 picks as the worst picks. Jackson Lynch, Adam Gotsis. After that, you got Justin Simmons, starter. I guess Devontae Booker.
But a 4th round pick.
Yeah.
There's a point where, people will wring their hands, and us being draft guys, we'll have opinions on, hey, maybe the Broncos should have taken Leon Jacobs instead of Keyshawn Bierria. But still, those are lottery tickets at that point.
Right.
So if you get something there, that's great, but you cannot depend on a lottery ticket. Otherwise, you're going to starve.
Right. But, I mean, Connor McGovern, starter. Andy Janovich, starter. Will Parks, kind of been a little bit more pushed down the line a little bit, but he was a pretty big contributor last year. And Riley Dixon is actually doing pretty good, just not with the Broncos.
Yeah. Unfortunately, they might have given up on him a little soon, but right. What can you do? So overall, good class. And then 2019, really it's too soon for a lot of these guys, but we are seeing some flashes. I mean, Noah Fant, he only had 1 target this past week, and they really could not afford to send him out on anything complex because how great the Chargers' pressure rate was, but he's pretty much right on pace of what you'd expect this year, the flashes. And I thought his blocking in this game was as good as we've seen. So that's worth noting. Dalton Reisner hopefully will make Bronco fans stop bringing up Quentin Nelson. Maybe that's a lot to ask for, but he's playing really good ball. Quentin Nelson probably the all-pro at left guard going forward for a bit, but Dalton Reisner is playing himself to pro ball contention. Really good player. Happy to have him. And on top of it, a dude who loves being a Bronco. I mean, there's something to be said for that. Somebody who takes pride in that. This draft, we've said it 1,000 times, it's probably going to come down to Drew Lock. If he can be not even a great franchise quarterback, if he can end up being a top 10 quarterback, obviously, hell yes. But if he can end up being Derek Carr, that's a hit in the second round. And the years that you're using on that rookie quarterback, you can contend. It's when you have to pay him that's when things get a little dicey. But we need to have historical perspective, I guess, when
Right.
looking at a guy like Drew Lock. Draymond Jones, I think he played his best game of his career this last week. I mean, he's slippery. He's starting to get more after the passer. He probably needs a year in the weight room to kind of change his body type, to put on more mass, a little more power there. But still, the upside, he has some stuff that you can't teach as far as getting after the quarterback with more juice than I've ever seen from DeMarcus Walker, who is having himself a solid year so far. So got to shout that out. Justin Hollins might be a wash year for him. We'll see with that knee sprain. But with Chubb out, hopefully we'll see him more as the edge rusher, because I think that's probably more of his spot. But kind of was sinking a little bit instead of swimming early on. Juwan Winfrey making some plays in special teams, but unless Sanders is traded, we probably won't see too much of him, but flashes have been there. And then Malik Reed, we're going to get a real chance to see him the rest of this year, see what kind of guy he can be, and maybe he can make Bronco fans stop bringing up Shaq Barrett as well. So an undrafted free agent guy, kind of out of the region in Nevada there. And I thought he had a pretty good game, but next week he's going up against Taylor Lewan. So we'll see more there. So really, Elway, as much as people talk about him being a terrible drafter, I think he's kind of changed that narrative recently, where he used to be killing it in free agency and bad in the draft. Now he's starting to get better in the draft, but the free agency has not been great, especially when you keep signing players who are injured, and you get them for a discount, but hey, guess what? They're injured. So, yeah, not great. But any thoughts, I guess, on this young talent? Any of these guys really stand out to you? So I guess I'll toss some questions out to you. The best guy on this list is
Bradley Chubb.
Okay.
I mean, I think that's a pretty easy one. I mean, there's a lot of good players that I think can really emerge, but he's the one guy that looks like you can really build an entire franchise around. I mean, Drew Lock maybe, but we still haven't seen him on an actual field. We've seen what Bradley Chubb does on a field.
Yep. Man, I agree with you. Okay, so the most disappointing player on this list. Granted, with the 2019 class, maybe that's not the most fair because we're 5 games in, but still.
I'm going to go Deshaun Hamilton.
Hamilton, okay.
Well, he's making me look like a fool. Okay. Because, if you remember when we were doing our draft breakdown after that 2018 draft, I said that I was more excited about Deshaun Hamilton than I was Courtland Sutton. And mostly just because I was excited that Hamilton, I thought, could come in and make a day one impact because he is such a great route runner. But he just hasn't. I mean, it's not all his fault. Some of it is the quarterback. Some of it is the offensive line. Some of it is the offensive coordinator. But there's still a lot that falls onto Deshaun Hamilton. I mean, he's had some opportunities where he's dropped the football. He's had other opportunities where he just didn't quite make the play like you would hope. So, I mean, that would be the guy for me that really sticks out as probably most disappointing so far. What about you?
For me, I would have to say it has to be Isaac Yiadom. 3rd round pick, probably the highest rated guy here that you'd want to depend on. And, not only can you not depend on him, but it looks absolutely dreadful. So not trusting his technique right now. Hopefully that'll come around. I still think he has some tools, although I do not love him in this scheme. So maybe that's something that'll get him out of here. But right now, not trusting his technique, not trusting himself, not trusting his teammates. And it's hurting. So he's been the most disappointing for me. So next question, most important guy out of these 2 classes?
Drew Lock. I mean, quarterback always is the most important. But, I mean, I think Flacco gets too much flack. See how I did that? Flacco,
yeah.
flack. Okay, just making sure you got it. Okay. But no, he's still not the future. I mean, it's easy to see that. He's holding a place until they can find somebody that can replace him. And the quickest way to turn this franchise around is Drew Lock to pan out. There's so many reasons for that. I mean, you think about the cap space that can open up with being able to cut Joe Flacco. You think about just the players that you can surround him with in free agency. You think about the young players that are already around him, that they're already building with Noah Fant, with Philip Lindsay, Royce Freeman, all those kind of guys. But yeah, if he can pan out, I mean, it just completely changes everybody's outlook on who the Denver Broncos are, especially 2020 to 2022. I mean, that's going to be that window, of course, when he's on that rookie contract that you're just going, okay, this is a team that can compete with the Chiefs, that can actually have a loaded roster, both sides of the ball, and really not be the Seahawks when they had Russell Wilson on his rookie contract, but that's kind of the every team's trying to replicate that. Because that was a team that could trade away first round picks if they wanted to. They could spend tons on free agency to load up that defense. And obviously they were competing for Super Bowls. And so again, that's the quickest way for the Broncos to become very, very relevant in this league. Yeah, have any other player you'd stick out for you?
I would have to say Locke is a great one. Man, I'll go Noah Fant. First round pick. You've had a lot of first round picks that haven't worked out, and taking a tight end round 1 is risky business, especially when you look like you might be needing a left tackle to replace Garrett Bowles, and Andre Dillard went right after him, who has very high upside, and maybe you could have gone with a defensive lineman, or even Devin Bush. That's Broncos need speed and athleticism at the linebacker spot, and Devin Bush could have given that, although it's too early to get too upset about that. But I think Noah Fant is one. I think the answer is Drew Lock. Okay, so a couple more questions for you, just because they're a guy that.
Hold on, can I share what's in my head right now?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, you said risky business, and all I think is Tom Cruise in his t-shirt and underwear doing the sliding on the socks thing.
That's what I do when I'm recording the podcast. So it's give you guys a nice visual there. Though I have dropped 25 pounds for the ladies listening, or dudes, whatever. I've been hit on by both. It doesn't matter. So, but yeah, no, it's I gotta go with Noah Fant in that regard. So, okay, both classes. Guy that's yet to step up that you think could provide a huge boost. 2018 first.
Say that question again. Sorry.
So a guy who has yet to really establish themselves or, make much of an impact that you are holding out hope and think they could still be a big contributor to this team.
From either class or just 2018?
Both.
From both? So I'm going to go... I'll go Justin Hollins.
Okay.
Just because the linebacker core is so weak right now. And he is that athlete that you could actually see being able to shine in the NFL. And so if he can really get things going, I know they used him more as a pass rusher in this last game before he got hurt than an off-ball linebacker. But if he can figure that role out as an off-ball linebacker, it just makes things so much easier for that defense. I mean, it's that easy position to look at and say this is a weakness. Although after this last game, I'd say cornerback's a bigger weakness than linebacker, just because some of the depth issues that are going on, and looking in 2020 when Chris Harris is going to be gone, we'll kind of see how we'll talk about that more in the future. But again, Justin Hollins really he's athletic enough to solve a lot of problems for that linebacker core.
Okay. I'm going to go with Juwan Winfrey in this class, just because I think the flashes have been good, and I like the upside. And even if he comes in as just a wide receiver 3 at some point in the future, that's valuable. And I'm going to double down. Both Hamilton and Winfrey. If the Broncos fall off, guys, I think it sounds like Sanders is the most likely guy to be dealt. You're going to get a chance to see both Winfrey and Hamilton if that is the case. And hopefully the Broncos pass blocking can be a bit better, so we can see a better volume and a variety of passing concepts, a little bit more aggressiveness in the pass game. But I think both those wide receivers, with the flashes they've had and the potential of increased market share for your fantasy football listeners out there, with Sanders probably on the way out, Tim Patrick on the IR, and outside of Sutton, it's those two. So I got to go with both Hamilton and Winfrey in that regard.
Good choices.
Yeah. Do you have somebody from 2018? Or probably Hamilton as well. Maybe Jewel.
Yeah. Probably Hamilton has the most opportunity to actually turn into something, especially this season. Josie Jewell, I think we've seen the best we can from Josie Jewell for the most part. I just think his ceiling is so limited. Hamilton, he's a little bit limited, but he's not as limited as Jewell. And yeah. I still think Hamilton has a skill set that can work well in this system. if they can just get him going. And like I said, if Sanders gets traded, Hamilton's going to get a lot more opportunities to shine. And I think he can still be something for the Broncos. I just think he's going through a little bit of an identity crisis right now. And I don't think it would take too much to get him turned around.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, that's going to wrap up this episode of Building the Broncos, powered by Overtime Media. You can find Carl on Twitter at Carl Dumler MHH and myself at Nick Kendell MHH. Make sure you head on over to Mile High Huddle, an affiliate of the Maven Coalition and Sports Illustrated. You can follow the Building the Broncos podcast and all our other great audio content by subscribing to the Huddle Up podcast wherever you listen to your shows. You can follow us on Twitter at Mile High Huddle and at BTB Football Pod. For Carl, I'm Nick, wrapping up another episode of the Building the Broncos podcast. We hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll see you soon. Starting a win streak. Let's keep it going, boys. Go Broncos.